The Outlanders Journey. Tier 1, Level 1. Chapter 4. Arc. You've never witnessed the forest from this vantage point before. Grounded and flightless, you walk alongside horse-drawn carriages and foot soldiers in small traveling parties. A year ago, when the roads were first opened, you observed these strange people from high in the trees. At first they seemed so small from above, their encroachment insignificant. But before you realized it, your way of life had already changed. New foods like bread and milk and cheese and pork and beef, which quickly integrated themselves into your staple diet. A plethora of magical technology that became essential for community operations. For you in particular, you gained the opportunity to travel out of the forest and perform for these foreigners. Your feet are sore. You've never had sore feet before. The road is paved but uneven. You glance up every so often, spotting the faint signs of activity in the trees. Aarakocras soaring from one platform to the other. An entire bustling ecosystem that you were once a part of. If you are ever to go back up there, you'll have no method of getting around, even with their meager pulley systems, rope ladders, and bridges. You're as useful now as the elderly and sick, to be rounded up and contained in one place while the remaining productive members go on about their business unimpeded. You know there are on-duty guards who can probably see you. Many of them probably recognize you. They'll tell everybody about how they spotted Coney, the aerial acrobat who disappeared after that horrible accident. You've become folklore now. Little do they know you're off doing better things, more important things. You're even more special than you were as an athlete. Just you and Errol, together on this extraordinary mission. If only Coach and Cree and Ovir and the others could see you now. You puff out your chest and straighten your back, adjusting your backpack. When you left the temple earlier this morning, it was clear that Errol was nervous, but she's calmed down since, trekking with a sure step. After a quick lunch break, you two have been continuing along in silence for nearly 3 hours, and she's hardly broken a sweat, though you can tell she's walking slower for your sake. Perhaps now is a good time to check in on her. "Ari," you say, "do you want to take another break?" She glances back at you and smiles. "Yes, of course." She points to the side of the road. "We can go sit in the shade." She takes your hand and leads you there, helping you settle down. The two of you lean against a sturdy oak tree, its fallen leaves cushioning your backside. You stretch your legs out, breathing a deep sigh. Your feet ache, and they're covered in mud. What an exciting new kind of pain. Much more tolerable than the persistent and blunt ache in your wings. Even before your injury, spraining your wings or shoulders was agonizing, made worse by the possibility that you could lose your greatest asset, the one thing you had. It's funny. You did lose it, and now you're happier than ever. "I don't usually see the forest from the ground up," you say. Errol laughs. "Everything looks bigger down here, doesn't it?" "Yeah." "I remember when you took me up there once," she says. "I looked over the edge, and all I could think was, are people really that small? Am I that small? All of my problems suddenly felt so insignificant." A monarch butterfly flutters near you, and you extend your talon for it to perch, but it ignores you. Across the road, a small elven child is bundling red leaves into his arms and tossing them up into the air. He spins around as they shower back down onto his head. "You know," you say, "I was going to say that being down on the ground makes me appreciate the small things even more." Errol picks up a maple leaf, twirling it between her fingers. "You're right. I really am glad you're here with me." She smiles at you. "You're not too tired, are you? Is your shield too heavy?" You shake your head. "I'm doing okay. Are you doing okay?" She nods. "Yeah, of course." "You're not nervous anymore?" She shakes her head. "Not at all." As you continue along the roads, you pass street vendors selling dried meats, honey, maple syrup, good berries, maps, supplies, carriage repair services. Dwarves and elves and humans alike, who've settled along the road to operate their own little stalls. Errol unfurls her map, which lists all the inns and restaurants that house and feed you for free due to your association with the temple. The innkeepers offer you their finest rooms with linens made of silk and serve you cured ham and freshly made juice. In some ways, this feels less like a missionary trip and more like a vacation. 4 days go by quickly, and by mid-morning, the sun still behind you, you reach the westmost end of the forest. The trees are gone, along with the protective presence of the mountains. Everything is flatland, tall, withered grasses with verdant rolling hills in the far distance. The winds continuously pass through, and the grasses roll like tidal waves. In an instant, you've teleported far away from home. The road is still winding far ahead, along with wooden cabins and barns and fencing and perfectly uniform patches of farmland. Some of them seem similar to the inns and shops in the forest, but most appear to be true residential homes. People really are settling out here. You pass through the grazing pastures of cattle, cornfields, fallow lands, and even an odd vineyard with, as advertised, free wine tastings. Errol's map has almost no information about the inhabitants here, and so you work off your own gut instincts, knocking on the doors of apparently hospitable strangers and offering them prayer and healing in return for a hot meal and a place to sleep. All of the kindest hosts are either half-elves or dwarves, who seem enthusiastic to hear that the Temple of Salvation is sending out official missionaries, even though they seem to find you two to be a peculiar pair. For one half-elven girl's 17th birthday, Errol offers a coming-of-age ceremony, and you spend the night celebrating with pork roast and cheese. Everyone who's set down their roots here live an Arcadian but fulfilling life. They speak endlessly about the freedom and opportunity they have, and how with hard work and determination, they'll be able to prosper far better than they did in New Everlon or Harrington. They also mention their desire to visit Liane to the south, and they ask Errol what that place is like, to which she bashfully answers that she has never been there before. You wonder what about her associates her with Liane. You sleep in the occasional barn, on the floor, in comfortable spare beds, and, because one rather eccentric old man decided the two of you needed to doze under the stars, 2 sturdy hammocks in a backyard. Lying underneath Errol's hammock, your wings painfully squeezed together. You can't see the night sky, and so, to lull you both to sleep, Errol describes every constellation she recognizes: Mistra's long weave, Corellon's steady bow, Saranre's open wings, the Raven Queen's possessive hand, Bahamut's 7 canaries. You can tell that Errol is still anxious, especially when she interacts with the hosts night after night. She listens to them politely, nodding and smiling along with their stories. She displays proper manners when she accepts the food, and she always offers to help clean. But it's clear she's uncomfortable, her speech often stuttering and stumbling out. She speaks so softly that sometimes people have to lean in to hear her. You've always known that she has a hard time socializing with strangers, but it's still surprising to see the contrast between how she acts around you and how she acts around them. Still, you can't help but love it out here. You love everything about your new life. You can't imagine why you ever thought you were only good for flying. You love waking up early in the morning and doing your forms and your meditations with Errol, sometimes even with your hosts. You love hearing about the different aches and pains that your hosts must tolerate, and watching their faces light up in wonder as you effortlessly heal them, feeling Saranre's warmth travel through your arms to your fingers. You love traveling together with Errol throughout the day, mostly in comfortable silence. You love how the air feels different out here, denser, fuller, more alive. You love Saranre. You love everything she represents. You love that she blessed, of all people, you. Finally, on your 18th day of travel, you see the first hint of a town, a sign pointing forward that reads, Eli, 2 miles ahead, in Elvish. Errol briefly told you that in Eli, you will meet a former acolyte who will take you in. She appears excited at the prospect of meeting him again. And then, you arrive there. Carriages have been passing you for the entirety of your travel, But the closer you've gotten to Ellie, the more one note these carriages have gotten, belonging only to the Blue Lion Army. The first thing you see when you reach Ellie is a ludicrously high wooden wall, about 20 feet tall. 2 guards stand to each side of an opened gate, their helms blocking their eyes and sweat dripping down their faces. In their hands are spears. They face the bright sun in chainmail armor, and they stand at attention, completely motionless and silent. You're not sure if you have to speak to these guards before you're allowed to pass through. You nod at them, but they don't seem to even regard you. Errol grabs you by the wrist and pulls you along, shuffling briskly into town. There are no more than 10 or so wooden buildings: inns, saloons, supply shops, armories, a jailhouse, and a town hall. The road seems to finally end at the town center, which features a single fountain with glistening water pouring out of the hands of a noble-looking statue. You notice, behind all the buildings, that the entire town is fenced off. You glance at Errol. She's nervous again, and for good reason. Everything about this place is strange. The atmosphere feels both desolate and lived in, dry and dusty, and yet there is running water coming from somewhere. All of the shops seem to be open, but you can't hear any activity inside. It's like everyone is in hiding. Most notably, there is an almost absurd number of armed half-elven and human soldiers posted outside the entrance of every single building. The only people out on the streets right now, besides the soldiers, are you and Errol. Still gripping your wrist, Errol pulls you along, trying to avert her eyes from the soldiers who must be watching you closely. She points to a 2-story inn at the end of the block. The inn is a plain wooden structure, in the same Spartan style as the rest of the shops along the street, but it is the only one with a vibrant red roof. The sign next to the door reads Dawnflower's Keep, with the familiar symbol of the Everlight above. A hand-painted sign leaning against the window reads, All are welcome. Pay if you are able, in Elvish. Errol rushes up the steps to the front porch. You pass between 2 more guards standing on either side of the door. Errol knocks 3 times. Within seconds, you hear heavy but brisk footsteps approaching, and the door swings open. A fair-skinned half-elven man with curly brown hair steps out, side-eyeing the soldiers before smiling politely at you. His eyes light up upon seeing Errol, and he opens his arms and pulls her in for a hug. "Sister Errol," he says. "My goodness, how you've grown!" Errol hugs him tightly. "It is so good to see you, Brother Taida. It has been too long." Come in," he glances at you. "And you must be the Brother Ark that High Priestess Vavina spoke of in her letter. Welcome, welcome." He motions impatiently for you to enter, quickly shutting the door behind you. Inside, you are greeted by a cozy, homey room. The floor is covered with a plush red carpet. There are scatterings of Saranrai symbols and paintings hanging along the walls, as well as brochures and booklets next to all of the seats. A young half-elven woman with long, fair hair tied back in a braid sits at the front desk. She stands as she sees you. Both she and Brother Taida are donning robes similar to what the acolytes were wearing at the temple, though theirs appear to be a bit more worn, the colors more faded. Brother Taida ushers you along, and you sense an impatience about him. He gestures at the woman and says, "Sister Ethel, these are our good friends. Sister Errol and Brother Ark. Sister Errol and Brother Ark, this is Sister Ethel." Sister Ethel nods and clasps her hands together. "Welcome, Sister Errol. Welcome, Brother Ark. We've been expecting you for some time. I am so relieved that you have arrived safely." "Thank you for having us," you say. Now that you're back among religious people, you don't know exactly how to conduct yourself anymore. Should you bow? You bow. You notice Errol isn't bowing, and you straighten back up. "I am sorry we were delayed," says Errol. "I know that you've been asking for aid for some time." Now, let's not fret over such things," says Sister Ethel. "You must be exhausted. Brother Taida, shall we get them to their rooms so they may rest a while?" You peer over at Brother Taida, who, although smiling, still appears anxious, twiddling his thumbs and blinking rapidly. He nods. Yes, yes, certainly. Let's get you to your rooms, and then you can come down for lunch. He claps his hands together. We have so much to discuss. Errol nods. Of course. It's like you're being hurried along. Brother Taida leads you and Errol up a flight of stairs, and you almost have to jog to keep up with him. He takes you down a narrow hallway and opens up 2 rooms at the very end. Please allow yourselves to get settled. We will call you down when lunch is ready. He hands you each your keys. Thank you, you say. He's ready to leave already. Oh, Brother Taida, says Errol, waving him down. He's about to turn, but he pauses. Yes? Do you mind if I borrow some parchment? High Priestess Vavina has asked me to write her a letter when we arrive. Oh, yes, of course. I'll provide you some after lunch. Is that all right? Yes, says Errol. Perfect. Well then, please feel free to get settled. He nods and saunters off. Errol glances at you with a confused look. When you hear him thumping down the stairs, she whispers, We never had a Sister Ethel at the temple. His letters to High Priestess Vavina also never mentioned that we'd meet a Sister Ethel. Really? You say. You lean in. I thought they were a couple. She nods. That's what I thought too, which is probably why he never mentioned her. She might have converted after meeting him then. Yeah, I think so. But I don't want to make any assumptions. Let's not ask him about it. Okay, you say. Oh, yeah, why did he leave the temple? Errol looks around and leans in, speaking even softer. I don't know. High Priestess Vavina never told me. I think he left 8 years ago? Did he leave on bad terms? It doesn't seem like it. As you can see, he and High Priestess Vavina still write to each other. I think they worked out something that lets him continue doing outreach here. Well, he does seem kind of anxious, don't you think? From how I remember him, he's always like that. Oh. Something clatters downstairs, and you hear Brother Taida and Sister Ethel's muffled voices. Let's talk later, okay? Says Errol. Okay. Your rooms are nearly identical to the guest rooms at the temple, with the same layout of the bed, the desk, and the various small trinkets related to Saranre. The only difference is the presence of a balcony that oversees the rest of the town. Through the window, you spot the many soldiers standing abreast, watching over the empty road. The entire town has a ghostly, eerie atmosphere to it. Before you can even set down your things and change into your spare clothes, a bell rings downstairs. Lunch is ready, Sister Ethel calls. A few doors down the hall click open, and you hear several individuals shuffle out and down the stairs. You and Errol open your doors, and you share a look. She seems to be just as caught off guard, still in the middle of retying a sash around her waist, her change of clothes haphazardly hanging off her shoulders. She shrugs at you and closes the door behind her, making her way down the hallway as she adjusts her collar. As you go downstairs, you notice a new room by the front entrance. Inside is a dining area with an arrangement of cooked stews and breads and fruit platters on the tables along the walls. There are about 9 other guests here, all human or half-elven, lining up with plates in hand, serving spoonfuls of food for themselves. Sister Ethel stands outside the dining room entrance, with her hands clasped together, individually greeting each guest by name. The 2 of you line up at the back, ready to take a plate, but Brother Taida taps Errol on the shoulders. As our 2 honored guests, he whispers, I'd like to invite you to a more private area. He motions to a room behind the front desk. Please come this way. He places a hand gently on the small of Errol's back, coaxing her away. Errol nods and steps out of line, and you quickly follow suit, entering the back room. Everything here is so strange. A long table is arranged inside the private room, with the same food that you saw for the other guests. There are 4 plates set neatly down before 4 seats. You're in an enclosed space with no windows and only some flickering candlelight. There are crates and boxes shoved into the corner. You can't hear any of the guests outside of this room. The walls seem very insulated. Brother Tyda closes the door behind him and motions for you to sit as you please. You and Errol sit across from each other, and Brother Tyda grabs the seat at the head of the table. He smiles at the two of you, tapping his fingers together. You watch Errol, checking for any signs that she's just as uncomfortable as you, but she appears strangely unperturbed. Is it just all in your head? A few moments pass, and soon the door opens again as Sister Ethel enters, settling down across from Brother Taida. "Let us pray," says Brother Taida. Everyone bows their heads, but you keep a single eye open, just in case. He leads you through a brief prayer, thanking Saranre for the food and her protection and guidance. You all begin to eat. Errol spoons some stew and carefully takes 2 slices of rye bread. You turn to see Sister Ethel watching you, smiling. She motions for you to help yourself. You nod and take the communal ladle out of Errol's hands, helping yourself to the stew as well. You take a bite, and it's perhaps the most tender beef you've had. It must have been slow-cooked for hours. The carrots and potatoes and onions are so soft you can break them apart with your tongue. You breathe a sigh. Maybe you were just hungry. There's a brief exchange of small talk. Something about High Priestess Vavina's health, how Errol's exam went, any new acolytes who have come and gone since Brother Taida. His leg is bouncing rapidly up and down, and you can feel the shaking. "Ark?" You look up to see everyone staring at you. "Oh, sorry, what was that?" "Is it true that the Everlight has endowed you with the blessings of the Chosen?" asks Sister Ethel. "That must have been an exhilarating experience." You nod. "I'm a bit fuzzy on what happened. It's like one of those dreams that you want to remember, but for the life of you, you just can't. When I woke up, I was on fire." "Oh my," says Sister Ethel, a hand to her chest. "Was it a painful experience?" "No, not at all. It was warm, but not burning." "I wish we were there to witness such an event. I have never been to the temple before, and it has been a dream of mine to visit someday." Brother Taida chuckles. "I have tried to explain to Sister Ethel that I've made this inn appear as similar to the temple as I can." "Yes, but I very much wish to see the indoor garden." "It is quite beautiful," says Errol. Sister Ethel sighs. "I was hoping to visit this past summer." "Oh?" you say. "Why didn't you?" "Unfortunately, both of our plans were interrupted," says Brother Taida. You can see him fidgeting with the tablecloth. "That's too bad," says Errol. "Perhaps next year, then?" "Perhaps," says Brother Taida, "provided we resolve the interruption first." You realize he's been trying to steer the conversation away. "Perhaps we can speak on this after lunch and after they get their rest," Sister Ethel says, insistence in her tone. "They must be very tired from their many days of travel." "Yes," says Brother Taida, nodding begrudgingly. "Of course." You clear your throat. I don't mind knowing about what happened. Maybe we can help. That's what we're here for, aren't we? To help people?" Errol nods. "Yes, I am happy to hear about the situation." Sister Ethel glances at Brother Taida, then nods. Brother Taida sighs, a severe look on his face now. His shaking stops. "Very well, then." He stands and walks to the wall that's shared with the guests' dining room. He places his ear against it, listens, then nods and returns to his seat. Errol sits up a little and swallows her food. She sets down her fork. "High Priestess Vavina told us that you needed aid, but she said you couldn't share any details." Brother Taida sighs again. "It is less that this is a secretive situation, and more so that I wish to involve as few people as possible. I asked specifically for the aid of the candidate, and so I only trust you two to handle the situation quietly and peacefully." "I see," says Errol. Brother Taida taps his fingers against the table and purses his lips. "I am sure that one of the first things you noticed about this town is its high military presence?" The two of you both nod. "Is that who you don't want involved?" asks Errol. The problem is, they already are. They are at the very center of this conflict. The reason they are here is because of the conflict. I see, says Errol. Before I say any more, let me ask you first, how much of Ellie's location and geography do you understand? Or, more accurately, how much do you know about the ecology of the area around here? You have no idea. You've never had to learn about anything outside of the INA. I know next to nothing, you say. I have studied it, says Errol, but it is possible my knowledge is outdated. I see. Then I will share everything starting from the beginning. Much of this information actually derives from Sister Ethel's studies. She is an ecologist, you see. Sister Ethel smiles and nods. You may have noticed the rather dry landscape on your way here. I'm sure it was a stark contrast to what you're used to from the forests and mountains. You nod. I heard it still rains heavily here, though, says Errol. During the wintertime, yes. Rainy season is starting soon, but I will get to that much later. For much of the year, having access to consistent water sources is, as you can imagine, absolutely essential. Especially if you are hoping to establish a town here. When New Everlon's settlers first arrived, they saw the value of this land, which we now call Ellie. We sit atop an aquifer, you see. During the rainy seasons, the aquifer replenishes itself. Errol nods. You do too, but you're not sure what this all means. Much of the ecosystem around here revolves around this aquifer and its surrounding rivers. Sister Ethel was among the first group of travelers to leave New Everlon and settle in this land, and she quickly noticed the migration patterns of the bison in this region. They come here during the winters and move back north in the summers. Right, says Errol, furrowing her brow as if she's also not quite following. Along with the endemic bison, there are nomadic groups who travel in accordance with the animals and the seasons. Specifically, there are tribes of orcs who normally settle these parts during the winter. There is a long pause. These orcs have... well, it is difficult to say who began the conflict, but there is an escalating dispute over territory and land rights. Oh, says Errol in a solemn tone. Now I understand. She rests her hands on her lap. No one is eating anymore. The sound of a muffled bell tolls outside. Sister Ethel excuses herself and leaves, closing the door behind her. I was not here to witness the conflict last year, as I was traveling at the time, but Sister Ethel has informed me that there were only a few soldiers stationed here, and they failed to fend off the orcs for the winter. Ellie residents had to retreat south, and most of them have decided to remain there until the orcs stop attacking. New Everlon considers this location too valuable to concede. Starting earlier this summer, they have sent soldiers in rather large waves. You may have noticed this yourself on your way here. Errol nods. As for what Sister Ethel and I have been doing, we have tried to act as proper mediators to prevent the situation from escalating too far. Sister Ethel, you see, speaks fluent Sylvan as a result of her studies, and I know a little bit from my time at the temple. We were planning to work with the orcs to see if they were willing to remain up north during the winter, provided we offer them ample supplies and food. However, things took an unexpected turn when the bison arrived earlier this year. Normally, their migration would begin some time now, but we saw the first signs of bison as early as midsummer. Brother Tyda sighs. This also resulted in the orcs' early arrival in the late summer, and so Sister Ethel and I were caught off guard, and we were ill-prepared. He closes his eyes, clasping his hands together as if in prayer. Within the past couple of months, New Everlon has deployed the full force of its military. In a matter of a couple of months, things have already escalated to war. Your mouth goes slack, and Errol's face has contorted with fear as well. War? Did you hear that right? You raise your hand. You say. Yes, Brother Ark? He says. I believe I understand the basics of your situation now. Are you asking for us to help you mediate? Brother Tyda nods. As followers of the Everlight, we believe in the power of peace, redemption, compassion, and forgiveness. It is therefore the job of all of us to de-escalate conflicts and forestall senseless deaths on both sides. I have, when the orcs first arrived a few months ago, been able to meet and speak with their chief in order to help reach an agreement. I hope to go find him again soon. What did he say? Asks Errol. He was rather bellicose, says Brother Taida. His mannerisms were aggressive, and there was quite a lot of unrestrained anger. They believe this land was taken from them, and they are willing to fight to the death to take it back. It is difficult to reason with such sentiments. How many of them are there? There were hundreds. Brother Taida rubs his temples. When you have as organized and powerful a military as that of New Everlon, it takes very little effort to completely overwhelm the opposing side. Considering how much fighting has happened, I believe their numbers have dwindled dramatically since I last spoke with their chief. Things are becoming dire. You realize you are breathing rapidly. Your heart is racing. He's expecting you to intervene in a war? So, why don't they realize it's a losing battle for them? Asks Errol. Are there no other places to settle? This is why I have called for your aid, says Brother Taida. I believe they harbor many misunderstandings, and in order for us to help resolve the situation, we must understand why they are still here and why they choose to keep fighting. I believe the best outcome is to convince them to leave and help them find a suitable home for the winter. The door opens, and Sister Ethel steps back into the room. Errol nods. I understand now. I am ready to help. You're surprised to see the resolve in her eyes, a complete lack of hesitation. Where was the anxiety you saw in her face when you first left the temple? Is this the difference between you and her, who has trained for these situations all her life? All you feel is a growing sense of dread. This is what it means to be the chosen of Saranre. This is what you agreed to. Getting yourself in the middle of a war. But this is so far beyond your realm of experience that it would be insulting for you to even be there. I understand you two need your rest, but I believe that our time is limited. If possible, I would like for us to set off first thing tomorrow morning. We do not know the whereabouts of the orcs anymore, and so it will take time for us to search for them, but we need to find them before the military scouts do. I understand, says Errol. Your chest tightens. You dig your talons into your knuckles, your shoulders trembling. Errol's foot lightly taps against yours. She smiles at you. She puts one hand on the table, and you notice she's shaking too. She inhales through her nose and exhales through her mouth, like in your meditations, and you breathe with her. Is that all right with you then, Brother Ark? Asks Brother Taida. His eyes are also full of trepidation. You're not on vacation, you idiot. You're here on a mission. You nod. Yes, I'm ready too. He sighs, though he does not sound very relieved. Very well. Let us finish up our meal. You all deserve proper rest for the remainder of the day. We have a long journey ahead.